We are awaiting our orders to move out for further contact with Jerry. The word has gone round that there is hot food on its way up the line, the first for many days. All we've had is basic compo rations to eat. We're all tired, but in good spirits, having just completed the liberation of Arnhem and Oosterbeek. Back in October 44, our battalion, after 7 months of continuous fighting, made it into Holland. We had spent the arduous and miserable winter on the island. This was an area of land held between two branches of the Rhine, the Nieder-Rhine and the Waal. This area figured so prominently in the fighting of the airborne lads attempting to seize Arnhem in September last year. It is joined to the mainland at Nijmegen by two bridges. The island, however, is a waterlogged lozenge of land. We were being overlooked by Jerry from the higher ground to the north, and were subjected to regular machine gun fire and shelling. Jerry were only 20 yards from our positions. Their positions could only be reached by boats or DKWs, or amphibious lorries, also called as ducks. I had a miserable time there. Clothes, bedding and my feet were wet most of the time, and our patrolling often had to be done in boats. After finally clearing the island in late March, our brigade were all along the Rhine. It was obvious to us all the next step was for our battalion to hop across the river and capture Arnhem. Word soon came around, all the companies, that our battalion were going to be tasked to carry this out. After weeks of taking a pounding from Jerry and being permanently wet, we are now having a chance to get at Jerry once more. We are being always kept in the loop by one of our officers. Our original intention was to cross the river some miles west of Arnhem, opposite Winghagen. Then orders changed. It was decided our battalion were to attack Arnhem from the east. This included the crossing of the Issel. The operation was to be codenamed Quick Anger. On the 9th of April, our battalion were informed to start moving up to a place called Grossen. We were warned that the area would be full of mines and booby traps, but thank God the move was completed without any incident. On the morning of the 12th of April, our CSM, or Company Sergeant Major, came over to us. He sat us down and he said, "Make your peace with God, boys, we're going to be setting off soon." He explained briefly to us all, the plan is that the Gloucester's recrossing first and we would be forming a bridgehead. Then our battalion and the Essex boys were then to pass through and advance into Arnhem. The town had seen heavy and bitter fighting with the 1st Airborne boys some 7 months earlier, and which since that date had been fortified by Jerry. It was not going to be very easy to take. Then on the night of the 12th of April, we had orders to move off. The Gloucester boys were to move off at 22:30 or 10:30 at night, and our battalion at 0300 or 3 o'clock in the morning. A few hours later, we checked we had enough ammo and grenades and checked if all our kit was correct. We were even handed out buoyancy aids, which are life belts, in case we fell into the river. I hadn't seen these since I last wore one back in June of last year. While we were sat outside the road, a loud rumbling sound was heard coming towards us. Through the dark, I saw, to my joy, a convoy of Buffalo armoured amphibious vehicles were pulling up. I was so happy I was going to be dry during this crossing. We all struggled to get into our Buffaloes due to our kit weighing us down, but after many curses we all managed to get in. With us was the brigade signaller, who was attached to our battalion. The order then came down the line. The engines of the Buffalo started up, with smoke from the exhausts everywhere. We all then moved up to our forming up point. It was a clear and fine night. With all the noise, I couldn't believe that Jerry hadn't woken up to the fact and hadn't started shelling us. Suddenly, a huge sound of that, much like a freight train, passed over our heads. It was a preliminary bombardment of Arnhem. It was heavy fire and impressive. I thought on seeing this, nothing's going to survive that. Then, right on time, the Gloucester boys moved off and started across the river. I could see through the smoke all types of boats carrying lads across the rough and fast-flowing river. Then, at 3 o'clock, a whistle blew and our buffalo began to shudder forward. It wasn't the comfiest rides, but at least I would be dry. As we moved into the river, I felt a shell hit nearby. We were drenched in water from the spray. It was only a short ride, but I was feeling seasick. The river was rough and water spray was everywhere. Suddenly, I heard an officer who was with one of our signallers start to scream. He was screaming obscenities at him. The language was so bad, I can't repeat it. I then realised that in the confusion and the shelling at us, the signaller had dropped the CO's map in the river. I was only just talking to him prior to us moving off. He was a good rugby player and boxer before the war. He had a nickname of Butch. As we drew near to the far bank, we all ducked down. The order was shouted to then get out. We had stopped near a wrecked railway viaduct. I managed to get my composure and my shaking had stopped. The ramp went down and with my bayonet fixed, I ran onto the wet slippery mud off the bank of the river. We kept running, haunch down as I ran. We passed through the Gloucester boys and made our way up into Arnhem. The sound of bullets was zipping around everywhere. We were already making contact with Jerry and I fired a number of rounds my number 4. Our password being used during the attack was be Yorkshire. This would be replied by friendlies with pudding. If this wasn't heard, we opened fire. As daylight was beginning to show itself, I heard loud whooshing coming over our heads. It was Typhoon ground support planes. We all cheered as they passed over us, their bombs landing in Arnhem itself. As we moved into Arnhem, I knew our battalion were to be the first to liberate it since the effort of the airborne boys. I felt such pride at this, as did the rest of the lads. On walking down a street, we heard a loud crack of gunfire. I hit the ground with a thud. Loud screams were being called out. Get down, sniper! I noticed someone had then brought up a Piat, a projectile infantry anti-tank, and then fired it into the window of a house not too far away. It silenced the sniper. By now, we were joined from the boys from the 2nd Essex. Our orders were now to clear the western half of the town. The town was a mess of blown up buildings and burnt out tanks, with bodies of those who had fallen months ago lying where they fell. House to house fighting was murderous. It was hand to hand for a time. There were many casualties. I then heard reports the town was in our hands. By now, we had orders to left turn and head to Oosterbeek. I was told that while we were fighting in Arnhem, the engineers had made a Bailey bridge and that it floated it all the way down the river. It was now allowing our armour to pour in across it. This made me feel so happy. We were now going to get tank support. On the 16th, we made our way from Arnhem to Oosterbeek. I did stop and have a look inside some of the houses just to make sure Jerry had gone. Being curious, while searching one of the houses, I lifted a blanket on a bed. I jumped back. I was in shock, but at the same time, my heart was broken. I was faced by a mummified British paratrooper from last September. I placed the blanket down gently and moved on. As I entered Oosterbeek, it bore the signs of a desperate battle which the airborne boys had waged the previous September. There were shattered houses, jeeps, equipment and parachutes lay tangled in heaps. Graves were everywhere and some bodies remained unburied. I thought this was an impressive memorial to the valour of the 1st Airborne Division and the heroic resistance they offered. I turned around and away in the distance lay the remains of the bridge for which they fought in vain and died. I saw crash gliders and tank tracks around the fields past. I was told with the rest of the company to stay away in case of booby traps. Fighting began to get limited. A few of Jerry showed no inclination to fight, and our progress was only made difficult by swarms of excited children, all waving flags, throwing flowers and shouting to us, "Good boy, Tommy." I felt I could cry. It was truly an amazing and exhilarating experience, and one realised how great was the relief of the Dutch to be freed from their oppressors. It's now 17th of April. I kneel here up against a wall in a street and back in Arnhem. We are awaiting orders to move off westwards for more contact with Jerry again. Call just come down the line. It's time to move on.